good for the switcher, but it's going to be good understanding terminology. Obviously, when you're in the military, you understand comms goes a long ways. So in the movies, they say things like over and out. That's not a such thing. In fact, that's ridiculous. It's over, and then it's out. But if you didn't start the conversation, you don't get to tell me out. If I contacted you and I say, what's your 1020 over? That means it's your turn to talk. Then you say, oh, I'm over here by the range. Over. I can say, okay, cool, I'm coming to you. Out. That's etiquette. But you don't get to tell me, oh, I'm over here by the range. Out. You just told me our conversation is done. Right. Doesn't work that way. So communication goes a long ways. Like, we have to be on the same page. So if I look at Darren and he's on his camera over here, and I say, hey, pull out from him, pull out. But he don't have any, like, what do you mean, pull out? Like, obviously I can kind of imagine what you mean, but that doesn't, so somebody else would say, hey, zoom out. Well, we're not talking the same lingo, so now you're worried about the fact that who's back there on Switcher tonight? Is it Tony? Is it Teddy? Is it Fred? Who's back there on Switcher? Because I got to understand what they say. Or we could just talk the same. So I'm going to give you some diversity of shots. We're going to talk, while we're giving diversity of shots, we're going to talk lingo. These will be on paper as well. So you have your wide shots, or what's called a long shot as well. You can say, hey, give me a long shot. What does that mean? So contextually, when you start a service, it's probably good that we start with the long shot. So that gives, like the entire congregation. Maybe we start on camera number 2. It gives the whole congregation, or maybe even the whole stage. So it just sets the mood for what we're coming into. So we use wide shots or long shots at the beginning of service to capture the initial interior atmosphere. So we say, hey, we're getting ready to go live. Give me a long shot, or give me a wide shot. That's terminology coming from the switcher, so the operator needs to understand what that means. Then we have a full shot. So give me a full. Well, if I say give me a full on pastor, you would think that that's the same thing, like this wide shot. It's not. Full is basically head to toe, so it reveals the whole stature of an individual. So you're going to get all of their attire. You're establishing their entire presence. Let me ask you a question. Is Cody back there on? Can you operate that computer real quick and give me, there's a picture of Brother Walia standing. How about he's standing and you can see the crowd in front of him, but he's standing behind them. You see his whole body. Right here would be a good example. I can see his shoes. That's a good example of full. Now, maybe that's pulled out a little bit more than, this is probably more of what we'll call over the shoulder, but I think if I had to describe the fact that we're looking over the shoulder, but we're capturing his whole body, that would be considered full. Then we have knees up. Give me knees up on pastor. I think we all know what that means. So you're going to frame the shot from the knees to the head. So it's basically middle ground. So we get that full shot. Well, not a full shot. We get a medium shot. This one here, it's called knees up. Yep. Some of these terms are used in some schools, and some are not used, and some are used in another. This is basically, I have to teach, so I'm just going to go with what I use. Cowboy. So if I'm framing, if I say, give me cowboy on pastor, give me cowboy on worship leader, give me cowboy on Josh, you're looking basically from the guns up. So that's going to be the hands. So cowboy is going to be from the hands up. So you've moved from the knees, but you kind of moved up a little bit. So again, are we probably going to say, knees up, cowboy, and then the very next one, which is going to be medium. Medium is waist up. We're going to say those very often because, my goodness, that's really, again, we're talking about simplicity. That's putting it in. I mean, if I go from knees up, cowboy, to medium, that's not much of a difference. But at the same time, from a production manager perspective, it kind of is. So if we're operating this camera, and I don't always want, well, we'll get into that tighter shot. I don't always want that tighter shot. I may say something like, give me a cowboy on pastor. That's where that kind of stuff comes into play, is really over here where it's so much in his face that we may. It really just depends on what you're trying to present at the moment. So again, wide shots or long shots, that's one. The full, knees up, cowboy, medium, Medium is waist up. Um, so you're getting the facial expressions, the hand gestures. So that's really where that's playing at. Then we have the tight. So give me a tight on Pastor. Give me a tight on Josh. Give me a tight on Tony. Give me tight or whatever. So tight is basically zoomed in so it captures the head and the shoulders. Yes, that's a tight. And guess what? It looks great. Now, mind you, we're looking at social media right now, but this was cropped it after the fact. But I mean, it's a great shot. That would probably come from maybe something over there. If we had the better telescopic lens in the middle, would come from there. Over the shoulder was the one that we show me an over the shoulder, the one that we were just looking at. Over the shoulder would be from the crowd. The crowd is over the shoulder, so that it would be the one that we were just looking at with Tyler. Okay, there's one over the shoulder, so that's probably not focusing. That's not focusing on anybody that's on stage. That's more like our roaming camera or whatever. He's going to give us an over-the-shoulder view. So and then here's an over-the-shoulder where our focus has changed. Our focus is no longer the audience, but now it's the preacher. So it's giving me that feeling that I'm sitting in service, sitting behind Brother Ted, and I'm looking up at the preacher. The other shot that we showed you is more, I'm involved in worship. We're all standing up. We're doing this. I'm not really worried about whether Tony's singing or not. It really doesn't make a difference. I'm capturing this right here, but it's all from behind. So those are two over the shoulders. At this point, you're just going to talk about pushing and pulling. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we would employ an over-the-shoulder shot during collective prayer, during worship service. It just gives you the community feel. So that's what you're pushing there. Let's talk about transitions, because this is obviously an argument between one group of people and another group of people. So transitions obviously play a pretty major role when we're allowing viewers to feel connected to the service. It's not just a thing. Like, we don't just transition from one camera to the next. There's actually, I'd say more of there's not a science to it, but maybe more of a UX to it, more of a user experience to it. So, yeah, I'm just trying to skip over what I don't need to talk about. At the end of the day, if you're running the switcher, transitioning, smoothness is the key. Now, you can cut all day long. It can still be smooth. You can auto, which is going to automatically take that fader, and it's going to fade up or fade down. It's going to give you a fade, or it's going to give. So whichever direction that you choose, it's still smooth. It just depends on the moments that you're choosing those in. So abrupt cuts, if you're using those cuts, it would be more for, say, faster paced. So maybe worship service, maybe we're believing you, Lord, for greater things. Whatever. We're whatever. You're getting that feel. You're giving the viewer at home a different feel. So everything is gentle. So even transitioning can be panning and tilting. So we've talked about that before. I think Sister Callie in one service ran camera number 2, and she panned across it's got to be smooth. It's got to be the cutting, the transitioning. Those are all transitions just as much as what the switcher's doing. So if the production manager / switcher is saying, hey, camera 2, give me a clean sweep, a long shot, clean sweep from right to left. You're going to start over here. He may not make it all the way over to this side. At the end of the day, and I'm not talking about anybody in here, I'm just saying, it's none of camera 2's business. At that point, everything, that's why I keep saying production manager, I'm trying to keep people in that mindset that we're over here creating shots, but it's his job to put them together. It's his or her job to put them together, to present that to the world. Well, my shot never got picked. I was over here focused on the bass, and I kept it there. I thought it was a cool shot. He never one time said, camera 1, you're live. But we appreciate it. But at the end of the day, I don't know how many of y'all have run switcher. That's a fast-paced job, especially when things are going and it's rocking and we're rolling. So just remember, whatever you're doing, constantly smooth. smooth. If we're zooming in, we don't really have the tools to zoom in right now, so we're not going to do that. But if we're zooming, if we're moving, everything is smooth. Brother Garrett is operating. He's working with that, with the roaming team. They've got to be even more smooth than we are. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like the movement, but there's a difference between movement and all over the place. So smoothness from the switcher to smoothness with the operators. So I said, push and pull. I've said panning and different things. So let's talk about that. Just because maybe everybody in here knows, but we're also being recorded. So panning, tilting, and zooming. Every bit of that is done with intention. Okay, there's only one time we did it without intention, and it was super cool, and that was our first service. And I think I may have told you that we were off of your camera too early, and I didn't switch yet, and you had went like this with your camera, and I was still switching over to camera 3, but it worked. It was great. That happened without intention, but it also was like, we can do that. So that's another thing that can be done at practices. But panning is a horizontal movement. So if I say pan left, pan right, it's horizontal. If I say tilt, tilt up, tilt down, we always know that that's the vertical movement. Zooming is in and out. So on this axis that we're sitting on, panning is here, tilting is here, zooming is here. So that gives us 3D. I think the only thing that's important on that is I think if we all speak with the same terminology, so we just went over the lingo from cowboy to medium to full to over the shoulder, whatever. Let's stick to push and pull when we talk about, because I can tell you, I would say, hey, zoom to Ethan. That just doesn't really hit. Like, if I say push to Ethan, that means you're going to zoom. You're going to leave Pastor and zoom into Ethan. Now, soon we're going to be able to do this because we're getting the throttles and we're going to have those in our hand. And you're going to be able to make that nice turn while working your focus ring. Make that nice turn and kind of slightly, but you're pushing to Ethan. So we're going to leave Pastor and we're going to push into Ethan. But if I say pull to the choir, we're going to leave the worship leader and we're going to pull, but at the same time, we're zooming out. So if I say zoom out to the choir, I mean, that's just a lot of, let's just all speak the same terminology. That way, no matter who's on the camera and who's on the switcher, we speak the same terminology. And honestly, if this is something y'all really enjoy and you ever did anything in the future with this, you're using the same terminology that everybody else uses. So I think that's it. Zooming will just be push and pull for zoom in and zoom out. So let's think obviously of these transitions as bridges, and I think this is maybe more for the production managers than operators, but operators obviously stay focused. But how well we tell the story or how well we bridge from one scene to the next, it can be done smooth or it can be done jerky. But if it's well executed, our online congregation, for them, more than likely, they'll never notice it. They don't notice the good. I mean, they may compliment on it, but they're not noticing the good unless something cool happens. But they always notice the bad. And so I know in my life, I can do all this much good and make one mistake, and I'm this much bad again. I got to work all that up again. It's the same way in this ministry. It's so visible. So I'm going to go to cutting and fading in just a second, but did you have anything on that one? Good? All right. Cutting and fading. Here's the real argument. Obviously cutting, or what they call straight cut, is an instantaneous. So I'm going from camera 2 to camera 3, and I hit the cut button. It's, yeah, just like that. Yeah, just like that. And so, and here's the thing, cutting and fading, you better make sure your shots are right. And that's where we have to really work together as a team. So the pros to cutting is it keeps the pace. So if we're in worship service, we can cut. Look, we shouldn't be on one person for, for 10 seconds. Like we should be with the pace. If we're in worship service, we're with the pace. So we're cutting. So rapid transitions, an immediate shift in focus. That's where that would come in. Here's the cons. If it's abrupt out of context. So pastor's preaching and we're in a moment and pastor's, maybe even the music has started to play softly and pastor's closing out and he's in this more solemn area. Cutting can kind of be really abrupt for that. You can really start to consider your fade or your dissolve. So during faster paced segments of the service is when you want that that direct shift of attention. For instance, moving from speaker to a sudden musical instrument. So we say, Josh is singing his verse, and then we want to shift over to Ethan on that piano. We're in the middle of service. Boom, you've got that cut. But the fade obviously is that gradual transition. So you can either use that fader, or you can hit the auto button, and it will do it on a set timing. We already had that timing set. It's gentle, so it can feel contemplative. So again, in the middle of preaching, probably the best time to start doing fading. It's more contemplative, less jarring, less direct. If it's overused, it can slow down the pace. And we've talked about that before. So again, we're probably not fading in the middle of worship service, but maybe we're not cutting in the middle of preaching. It really just depends. We really have to adapt that to ourselves. I'm not telling you there's a right and a wrong and somebody's going to stand over your shoulders and say, what did you just do that for? At the end of the day, if you're on that switcher, you're there for a reason. And yeah, we may be open to constructive conversations, but just kind of weigh those out based on this knowledge. So during more meditative parts of the service, such as transitioning from preaching to prayer or between songs, where we're not necessarily in the jump, so we transition from one, and you'll hear the drums, you'll hear that swell on it. Well, those swells, that's the same thing as a fade. So you can do it in between that. I just want to say this, consider the rhythm. Consider the rhythm and the emotional tone of the moment. If pastor's preaching and the rhythm and the tone is more this, we're probably going to fade. If he's preaching and he's hype and the organ's down here doing its thing, we cutting. So that's what you're really going to contemplate. For lively, fast-paced segment, direct cut is efficient, keeps the energy flowing. On the other hand, for moments of reflection, prayer, other things, a fade can underscore. Let me give you another good example. Sunday mornings, we do the prayer up here at the front. The music's playing. It's doing its thing. Even while they start singing, but we've got camera 3 looking through this audience or whatever. We got this one, and they're kind of coming together, and we're catching the backs of people and people getting their hands laid on them and different things. Probably a good moment for fading versus cutting. So those moments there. But here's a word of caution. Regardless of the choice, over-relying on one type of transition can make the broadcast feel monotonous. So if all we do is hit cut the whole time, it's very monotonous. So it's essential to strike a balance, understanding the pulse of the service, letting that guide your transition choice. So you've got that 35,000-foot look at the service. You see three or four cameras, depending on what we're using. Let the tempo and the emotional aspect of the service control how you're cutting or how you're transitioning. Think of each transition as a punctuation mark on a story. Do we need an exclamation point here? Do we need a period? Those are the things that you're thinking. So focus areas, understanding the significance. Obviously, we understand that when we're preaching, there's probably a focus on one area, and that's the preacher. But when we're singing and we're worshiping, there's multiple focuses. Maybe somebody's singing the lead on this one part, and you want to capture just so that people are like, oh, wow, somebody's singing a special part, but I don't see them. So, that does happen. So it is good to say, hey, Josh is singing this verse. Let's put it on Josh. But sometimes when we go to the whole group that's singing, there's nothing wrong with capturing some of that where we had some of those worship, the hands and everything else. But we need to look at and understand our focus areas. Obviously, the hierarchy of focus during sermons, it's going to be pastor. During worship service, music and everything has a way of stirring up the emotions. Well, transitioning between wide shots, so you've got those long shots that we say, hey, give me a camera 3, give me a wide shot on the audience. We could say something like, pulls of the audience, which is going to automatically let you know if you're on 3, more than likely our focus is on the audience and not necessarily. But those shots right there are going to give us that emotional connection to the worship services being had. Don't get me wrong, during service, when they're preaching and people are up clapping their hands and it's one of those kind of messages, there's nothing wrong with capturing, going back to that over the shoulder and capturing those hands clapping. But at the end of the day, the hierarchy goes back to what's the focus of this moment. So worship service, a good mix of wide shots for context, tighter shots for the more intimate, detailed stuff. Amplifying through audience reaction. That's where we get into, the emotion of the audience. Can we get some of those over the shoulder? We don't want to get in people's faces. That's one thing. But capturing like the unified amens, during worship service with the music, silent, prayers, like right before altar call. There's nothing wrong with, we're allowed to come from the side and from the back. Already cleared that with Pastor. We just aren't going to bring our Roman cameras right in front of somebody's face during an altar call. But we can capture them from the side. We can capture them from the back. We know the ones who've asked us not to. We just try to avoid them. But for the most part, if Pastor's preaching and I've got my hands like this or like this right here, there's nothing wrong with us capturing those moments. We're just not going to do the ugly prayer face. Like, we don't want people to be embarrassed of what's being shown. Maybe think about ourselves. Over-the-shoulder shots or wide shots show audience engagement, but be respectful. Avoid focusing on individuals who may be having very personal moments unless it's contextually appropriate, which could be moments like baptism, different things, because we are getting those cameras in the baptismal. At the end of the day, be intentional in focusing on moments that elevate the service's emotional and spiritual impact. Balance between focusing on the stage and capturing the congregation's reaction to provide a comprehensive and immersive live stream experience. So let's talk about the rule of thirds. How many in here know about the rule of thirds? All right, your lines on the screen? That's the rule of thirds. So if you've operated a camera, you probably have seen the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is basically breaks your screen up into 9 blocks, basically. So you have lines horizontally, you have lines vertically. And it gives us positioning key elements. So Pastor, right here, he is on, if you were on camera 3, this is what we really need to determine. Are we going to talk, what are we going to call this? The back or the front? He's on what I would call on camera 3 the back, but he's on the back. So we have him, which in a perfect scenario, if he's here, that means more than likely he's looking in this direction. Why? Because right now, if I'm the viewer, I want to know where he's going. Who's he talking to? Who's he looking at? Because the viewer, if I was sitting here where Garrett's sitting at, I know exactly where he was going. Why? Because more than likely, I'm looking this direction. I don't see this side over here. More than likely, I never saw the pulpit. I saw Pastor in those seats. So why would our rule of thirds not reflect the same? Okay? So this shot right here, more than likely, Pastor should have been on. That's going to be tough. Left and right. Yes, I would do that because right now with his back facing this, I would call that the back just because that's what I was looking at. So that would be the left third. His head should be on that hash mark where they intersect that. Unless whoever's running switcher tells you, give me more headspace or give me less headspace, Don't just be like, oh, well, I've already got them in that hash mark, so it's good. At the end of the day, they're looking at all cameras across the board, so they may say, give me some or give me less. But a good place for you to start is to say, okay, this hash mark right here is where his head is going to be. So he's going to, I would say he needed to be on that left side. Now, why? Because he's walking forward, and if I missed him on that left side and he started walking forward, well, he's only walking this way. He's not going out of my view. So now I can grab a hold of that, and I can start to turn it and move it. And right now, I'm too late. The production manager has got to switch shots on me quick. And he's happy, and he's probably not excited either. He's like, oh, my goodness, because he's walking off the stage. Where this really came into play was when we was over there, and we had those speakers. And, man, he'd cross over the speakers. You got to go to camera one. Then you cross over that speaker. You got to go to this. And it's fast. And if the team, that's why I started getting with the team and saying, your only focus is from this speaker to that one. Your focus from here to here. Because I knew I'll just go to those other cameras. So, obviously, you got the horizontal lines. You got the vertical lines. The grid aids position key elements in your frame to create balance, depth, and context. So speakers and preachers, when capturing a preacher, aim to place them on the top left or the top right. So again, over here or over here. You can kind of scroll through a couple pictures if you want to. Yes. Yes. Okay, so I'll just say this. Nobody walks over there because that's where the instruments and all that stuff's at. Generally, we already know they're going to probably be walking this direction if they're preaching. Pastor, we planted this computer over here, this camera over here. That's what he wants. But for some reason, he preaches the most this direction, and we get his back like crazy, which only matters when he's sweating. It's like, oh, we can't show his back no more. Yeah? So we got two cameras at this point because he rarely preaches this way. So yes, but I'll tell you, this camera right here, if it's looking at me, I can probably guarantee you right now, I am on the left top, and there's a space in front of me. Why? Because I'm facing this direction, and the crowd understands that it's not about the fact that I'm getting ready to walk this way, even though I'm not walking this way. But at the end of the day, it's about giving that lead way to the front. So if I was facing this way, more than likely, that camera, I'm preaching over here, that camera's going to put me on the left. That's not, yep, yep. That's not a bad shot, and the reason being is because he's looking directly at the crowd. We're pulling it from camera 3, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, we're pulling it from camera 3, and what are we going to do? We're going to put him on the left top, and it's going to give us space over here. He's not, but just remember, that's why, see, this is what happens in church. We lean on the wall like this right here, and then when Pastor moves, we jump up and we grab the camera. Honestly, this is us. Because we're camera operators. My hand needs to be on. That's what these are for. My hand needs to be on here. Because if my feet are shoulder width apart, and I'm standing in front of this, now I can sit here. This is us. We lean on the wall, and then we grab this. Oh, I can tell you right now, that just jerked this way. But if I'm already here, I got my hand on this camera and this one here, I can tilt, I can pan. Now, my feet are shoulder width apart. I'm not starting with my arms because my arms are close to my body. My arms are tied in like this right here. I'm moving with my hips, with my body. It makes a smooth pan. So now, Brother Leon, Pastor Leon is up here preaching. I got him in the dead center right now. All right? That's fine. Nobody's going to argue with me because he's preaching right at us. But if I'm here and I'm already prepared for Pastor Leon looks to this crowd over here. My hip movement is that simple. That's all I did. I just adjusted my hips over here. And when he shifted his focus, my camera kind of brought him to that left side, or my camera will bring, or he shifts his focus over here, my camera will bring him to that right side. It really depends. What we don't want him doing, maybe we have a different picture, but what we don't want him doing is facing a direction where it looks like he's preaching to a wall. Yes, right now, he's preaching to a wall. Now, a lot of this came from Wednesday because he was operating the camera like would have operated over here, and he said that to me. So I'm not saying anything he didn't say, and he didn't do terrible. Honestly, I took free shots. So it's not like you did this the whole service. I just took free shots so I could say, okay, this is what we are trying to avoid. Where is he going? That's what the crowd is thinking. Is he about to walk off the stage? Like, what's happening? So, yeah, so right now, more than likely, with our hips, we would have adjusted this camera to that left top side. So his head would have been on that left crosshair over here, and we'd have had all that distance. You want to lead? Yes, sir. Figures. Oh, another good on the left, and maybe they have a picture of this. Wednesday nights, pastor uses the vibe board now, okay? Well, we're not presenting it just yet on the live stream, so it's good. So he's on the left. It gives us the ability to have that vibe board in play. Now, when he turns around to preach this way, notice we moved. You can go back to that last picture. That was good. When he turned around to preach this direction, notice we kind of shifted. His focus is no longer on the board, so neither is ours. He's talking to us. So we've shifted a little bit off there. So that's good. But go back to the one right before where he was, yes. But this one here, he is talking about the board. He turns around, he says something to us, but I can tell by his positioning, he was talking about the board. So obviously that's it. You know what I would do with this frame here? First, I would adjust the white balance. That's the first thing I would do on this. But maybe I'm wrong. It's just my eyeballs. I'm going to put him over here on this left, and I'm going to use this board as a second subject. So we're going to even it off. We're going to put one subject on the left and one subject on the right. So more than likely, this board wouldn't have been cut off. Probably the best way to do it would have been to bring him to the left and make the board a second subject and bring it to the right and crop the shot that way. There's probably not going to be too many times in service that we can just go to sleep. And unfortunately, that happens, and that's where you're catching a lot of those wake up, grab the thing, and move on. It doesn't make a difference to the camera operators because they don't see it like we do. But when you're the production manager for the night, you see it. When you're the viewer, you see it. And we have to hurry up and jump off of your camera because you fell asleep. Singers and choirs. For worship leaders, use a similar approach with singers. So on worship leaders, use that similar approach. Put them on that right or the left, okay? Here's the problem with this shot to me, how it feels. Sister Anita is not singing a special, but she's a worship leader. We see that she's in the front just like Josh is. Josh isn't singing one either. I'm probably going to try to put Josh on the right and her on the left. It just feels uncomfortable that she's falling, even though she's on the front. See, Sister Amanda's not on the front, so she's in the back. If we had like a 2.8 aperture, she probably would have been way more blurred than that. But those two right here on that forefront, so to give the depth of field, you're going to, if it was me, I probably would have tried to keep them close to, he would have been here, she would have been there. There's nothing drastically wrong with this shot. It's just when I look at it, I say, okay, well, how could we improve that shot? I'm probably going to bring it over just a little bit and capture the other worship leader in there as well. We just want to ensure that people are visible, that they're in focus. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Contextually, okay. So if I'm pulling this is a knees up shot. I'm pulling a knees up shot, it's not tight, then I'm not going to play it like it's tight. Like Josh is not my focus here because it's a knees up shot, and he's obviously he's not singing because he's not singing right this minute. But it's a knees up shot. So now let's capture the community. But here's where practice comes into play. The reason why they're not going to write down who's up front is because Sister Anita never stands up front unless she's singing. She's going to move up. Then on the next song, she's going to move back. Well, who moves up then? Probably Anna, Sister Maddie, somebody like that. But Trey would never know that because we determine that probably at the end of practice when we're like, hey, you stand here, and then when Anita will come, Sister Anita will come up, then Maddie will pull back, and then Sister Maddie will pull up, and then that'll happen. But when we are at practice, we understand what that is, and then what happens at the end of practice is we all come up here, we meet with the team. Sister Grizzle generally closes out the practice, but whoever's closing out the practice goes over. And if you have a question as to, hey, on the first song, who all's standing up front because we want to get a good understanding of that, then you can ask those questions. That's what that moment's for. So I would say those are mental notes we'll just take on our own because I don't think Trey writes those generally before practice. Yeah. Yep. I think we're good. I think we're good. I'm going to put the rest of this on paper. We understand the wide shot, the long shot. We understand the full shot, the cowboy shot, the medium shot, the over-the-shoulder shot, the knees up shot. We understand those. We understand push, pull, pan, tilt. I think we've looked at enough to understand what we're looking for with cropping. We're just not trying to get that same old boring, put the person in the middle, looks like a picture you took with your Kodak camera back in, the 90s. Like, we're trying to get, actually, that's what everybody wants now, so that's not a good explanation. But anyways, let's stand. We're just going to pray. I appreciate y'all bearing with me. I tried to bring all this down into as little as we could so we didn't have to be here all day. And we're about 20 minutes over. I know. No, it's not ready just yet. You'll have to wait. There's good steaks on the back counter back there. Awesome. But I really appreciate y'all hanging out with us today. It really does mean a lot because, I know especially, like y'all, you've been here for a long time doing this thing, and just being here just to listen to me ramble, it means a lot, and I think it shows a lot to the team. So that's awesome. I really appreciate that. People that are wanting to rejoin and join and all that good stuff, it's good. So let's pray. God, we thank you so much for being with us here today. God, we ask that you honor this time, this sacrifice that we've made. God, that you'll allow this information to be retained, that you'll allow us to take it home with us, that you'll allow us to use it, oh God, to perfect our craft. God, because we're doing this for one purpose, and that's to convey the love of God to this world. And I believe we're already doing that. We just want to do it to the next level. God, help us this Sunday. Put this stuff to good use. And we pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.